Good evening and welcome to another edition of Fresh Natural Live. I hope your Monday's gone well. We're here in Houston, Texas, and this weekend I had a lot of relatives over because I have a lot of relatives live in Southeast Louisiana, so many of them were had evacuated because of the storm, Hurricane Ida, and so it had been a while since many of us had gotten together, and so I put together an impromptu Hurricane Ida get together, and so I had relatives over, and of course, I prepared food. It was all plant based, and the interesting thing is that many of them, of course, they know my philosophy, so they were anticipating that it would only be plant based food. So many of them had eaten before they came to the event, and so I thought of my situation frequently when I'm going to events when they're serving, the standard American diet foods, and oftentimes, what I do and what the strategy we recommend other people do is eat before you go. And it was interesting to think about the opposite being done for people that ate the standard American diet, come into a place where they were serving only healthy food. So, okay, get your fill in your other things. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But tonight's discussion is going to be on food procurement. And it's one of those topics we lecture on in our healthy lifestyle series. And it's I think, a very important concept because the procurement of food is very important. We all, like to think we eat healthy, and we all try to eat healthy. But one thing we may not think about is the actual procurement of our food. Where does our food come from? How is it grown? What has happened to it before we've eaten it? So if you go back to the very early aspect of your food, how was it grown? How was it, was it harvested in its wild state? Did it grow up in its wild state, or was it cultivated in some manner? If it was cultivated, was it cultivated in a way that was more natural, say in a sustainably grown way or organically grown? Or was it, sprayed with pesticides and various other things, or grown in a nutrient poor soil? So these are the many things that we think about in food procurement. And then, of course, the next phase is, what's happened to it once it's gotten to us. Was it, fried or chemicalized? Because, how long did it stay on the shelf? I mean, we can argue that plant-based foods are the original source or the ideal foods. Then it's okay, great. But then, what has happened to the plant foods once it's gotten to the point of consumption? Because what happens to the food from the point of its origin to the point of its consumption is really important. Because one, the nature of the food is important. So we talk about that a lot: vegan, vegetarian, raw, this, that, and the other. But then we need to understand, that point from here to here, where the point of origin to the point of consumption, that food needs to be as close to its natural state as possible for it to be most beneficial for us. And so in that context, we're going to talk about food procurement. And my colleagues and I will be on, and we're going to look at a couple of videos of some other experts talking about different aspects of the food industry and approach it from different angles. And we're going to look at those videos along with you, and we're going to have comments on them. And we're going to take your comments and so on. So, the good news is, the bad news is you won't, see me discuss a PowerPoint presentation, and the good news is you won't see me give a PowerPoint presentation. It depends on your perspective on things. But I think you're going to get a lot of information from this show, and I think it's going to be very important. We're not talking about COVID-19 or COVID-19 vaccines, but there is a relevance to this because everybody's afraid of the vaccine because of what might be in it, what toxins or whatever the case is. And for whatever your beliefs on that is what it is. But, your food has a lot of things in it. And so we need to be, on top of that as much as anything else. So sit tight, get your pen and pencil out. We're going to have a great show for you tonight. And I think you're going to learn something. And of course, before we get started, If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe, hit the notification button, and of course, give us a thumbs up or a like if you feel inclined to do so. That helps this information get out to more and more people. Hello again. Hello, everyone. And again, welcome back to another series of Fresh Natural Live. And we'll be talking about food procurement this evening. I want to first bring on one of my colleagues, Dr. Pamela Atkins. How are you doing?
Hi, good evening. I'm doing great.
Good evening. How's your Monday going?
Going good. Going good.
So we have a number of people in the studio who are interested. Hello, Catherine Welch. She says, good evening. I'm here for what is sure to be a wonderful and provocative discussion. I agree. And so good evening to Karen M. Evans. Hello, Joy 31608. Barbara Perlis. Hello, how are you doing? Nicole and Karen Evans, there you are again. No plant-based hot sausage po' boys? Well, let's think about it. The Relationship Zone, TRZ, Mary McCoy, how are you doing? Barbara Sanders, how are you doing? Let's see here. Barbara Sanders said, I heard the pesticides stop the plants from getting all the sun it needs to be healthy. Okay, we'll talk about that. I don't know that to be, we'll talk about that. Barbara Sanders there again. Cynthia Hammond, yep, I agree. Know what's in your food and everything else, and ear hustler, etc. So anyway, so Pam, what are your thoughts? I mean, does food procurement, and I mean, you've always, been a big proponent, and I know it's always, organically grown stuff. And pesticides, we've had that discussion. You've been a huge component, and we just been joined by Dr. Celeste Palmer. Whoops, she just lost her video. Dr. Palmer?
Yes, hold on.
Okay. I saw you backstage. Your video's working fine, but then it
I think I hit. Okay.
Okay. All right, good. So anyway, hello, welcome to the show. How are you doing? How was your day?
It was good.
So I was just talking with Dr. Atkins, and you were talking about, for many years she's been a big advocate of growing food organically and really, discussing this. So let me hear from you first in this context, from the whole aspect of food procurement in terms of where we get our food and that type of thing. What's your take on this whole issue?
Okay. I thought.
No, go ahead, Dr. Atkins. Sorry.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. I've been, I guess, referred to as a purist as far as food, but I think it's really important to have our food security, know where your food comes from, and know how it's been handled. Just because something is non-GMO or whole grain, but it's in a package, things have happened to it before it got into a package, or before it was in the flour form, or even cereal that's whole grain. These are packets, coming in a package that's a concern. What has it come in contact with? The pesticides, the herbicides, etc. And so I think it's so important. It can increase the risk of many cancers and many chronic diseases. And so I think we should be more careful of what our fruit, our vegetables and fruits and grains, where they come from, as well as, meats, people that eat meats. And, we don't, we try to advocate a plant-based diet, but those eating meats, you have to think meats and fish. You have to think about what happens to that before it gets to you as well.
Yeah. First of all, birth happens to that's worse. But anyway, That's when it goes wrong. Dr. Palmer, unmute your mic. Let us know your thoughts on this whole issue of food procurement and where it comes from and so on and so forth.
I think it's a subject that's really a little bit scary when you really start to read and find out what they're doing to our food, the definitions of GMO and definition of organic, USDA organic, and what we think we're eating and what we are actually eating. So, I mean, that's why I advocate for, even though I haven't gotten it to 100% myself, for growing your own, and so you know exactly where it came from, and you're eating clean, because I mean, really, we are what we eat. So if we're eating a lot of chemicals, that's what our body becomes, a chemical farm. And the result of that is dis-ease in the body.
Yeah, I agree. And, in this whole era of talking about, coronavirus and the vaccine, and a lot of people are out there saying, well, the vaccine is going to, change your genetics, and it's going to, your arm's going to fall off, and so on and so forth. And we don't have any evidence of that, but the point is that they're concerned about something foreign or unnatural coming into their body. And I remember listening to, I didn't really hear the comedian Chris Rock say this, but I heard somebody, said him saying, so I guess it was hearsay. But anyway, he was quoted as saying, everybody's worried about what's in the vaccine, but, you don't even know what's in Tylenol. And I laughed at that and thought, and so, well, you know what, that's true. And not only that, we don't know what's in a lot of the foods we're eating, the chemical preservatives and the things, and then what goes into the soil that our food grows out of, the chemicals that we spray our soils with, and so on. And so, this whole process, I mean, we're right now in this situation where everyone is, okay, I'm afraid of this, that, and the other. But, I think for a long time, there's been this background of the chemicalization of our planet, our ecosystems, and our bodies. And I want to, although we're talking about the procurement of food, I think that's important. I think that it's important that we, put this in a context of, hey, what happens to our food has a consequence on what happens to us when we eat the food. And there's a lot, that goes into this. This crosses the area of science and health and politics and business, if you will, because, the commercialization of something, brings about the desire for gaining or growing profits. And if you have a food producer whose primary motivation is for profits, then that's going to be a separate motivation than what the intention for food or the fundamental need for food is, which is optimal nutrition and health. So if somebody who's producing your food is producing it for the purpose of making more money, then they're going to cut corners that may have an adverse consequence to your health. And so I think we just need to put all this in context and understand that. And so as both of you pointed out, that we should know where our food comes from, even to the extent of growing it ourselves. I think it's really important. And I think doing that has collateral benefits as well.
But can I add something too?
Absolutely.
Just because I think we have to, again, start to take some responsibility. I'm not going to name any places, restaurants, but I think when we go to some of these fast food places, there's no expectation that anything in there is good for us. And nobody thinks that. It's not a secret. We know that it's just purely entertainment food. And so I think it's time for us to recognize that we're doing that, and we're doing it every day, all the time, and take some responsibility to make some changes, because that's what's leading to our depletion in our health.
No, I agree with you. There's a consciousness, a conscious behavior that we have. Dr. Axe, you going to say something?
Yeah, I think, I piggyback on what Dr. Palmer said, that, we feed our children this food, and many times it's out of convenience. We buy things, buy fast food, purchase fast food and everything, that food of that nature. And many in our inner cities and urban communities, many times we feel we're giving nourishment to our children, giving them fast food, hamburger, French fries, fried chicken, Cheetos, and but it's really not quality food and nourishment, and again, and also pregnant women, and breastfeeding women, we need to be more conscious. We push that breastfeeding is so important, but we need to push what you are eating is what the baby's eating. So to eat as clean as possible. I think we shouldn't scare people to say, that we have to grow our own because everybody doesn't have a place to grow, enough space, but maybe get involved, as I said before, more community gardens that grow pesticide free, and there are more popping up everywhere all over the country.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And I think growing your own is part of the spectrum. You're right. Everybody doesn't have a big plot of land, but maybe you have a pot, you can grow your herbs and then maybe get something else from somewhere else. So it's kind of part of a spectrum. I like the part about pregnant women. If we all see a pregnant woman, eating, drinking alcohol, we would think badly of her. We saw a pregnant woman smoking a cigarette or smoking a crack pipe, we would think badly of her. But if you saw a pregnant woman eat a burger and French fries, we say she's eating for two. We wouldn't think badly of her. So I think there's a kind of a collective social acceptance of poisoning ourselves, which is part of it. I tell often my patients, I say, my so-called baked chicken heads, I refer to them as, they're addicted to baked chicken. I say, well, as a baked chicken head, your condition is worse than being a crackhead, because at least as a crackhead, people recognize that to be a problem. But as a baked chicken head, they're going to encourage you to eat more. And so, so the part is pretty problematic. But Bev Kelly says that community gardens are wonderful. I'm going to show a slide here. I'm going to go back on my word just a little bit. I got one slide. I couldn't go back. But anyway, but this is a nice slide, so I won't, kill you with it. But I think, both of you made the point about, supporting local gardens and communities. And I want to just show this, slide. Recently, I've been, doing this, and I've been eating plant-based for 18 years, but it's been a journey for me. And so, now I'm eating raw. But more than that, I'm transitioning to eating more local. I'm going to the farmers market at least once a week, usually twice. And I'm purchasing their sprouts. Our restaurant now have sprouts, especially grown and delivered to us every Tuesday. I'm working on transitioning all of our greens to local growers. So we make that transition. There's a logistical thing, from a business standpoint. In everybody's lives, you have to make these logistical changes, And so some of the things you talk about, the mothers feeding the kids, the fast food in the inner cities, their logistics, they're working, they're busy, they're tired because they're eating fast food. So they don't feel like making, other things. And so it's just convenient for them, et cetera, et cetera. So oftentimes they consciously know it's bad, but they say, I got to give them something, and so on and so forth. And I think I want to get into that debate a little bit, not debate, but discussion a little bit. But I want to say this, to piggyback on the comments that both of you made regarding buying local. And I think it's really important because, when we talk about illicit drugs like cocaine or crack or whatever the case is, people they argue on the supplier side versus the recipient side or the user. And some people are, well, you got to cut off the supply. And other people say, well, you got to cut off the user. And I think both are right, or both have a valid point. But the thing is that on the user side, if you have the users, like if I'm a dope pusher, I'm going to go and get somebody a sample of dope. The first dose of dope is usually free. And so here, take this, and you get addicted to it. The next time you have to pay for it, then that feeds that dope dealing economy, And so, the more people drink, the smoke dope, the more money the dope makers make. And so you can make a similar argument that, if you smoke dope or use dope, then you're feeding in and supporting the dope producing community. So if you want to eat bad food, eat junk food and trash food, then those fast food places make more money and they just make more fast food. If we eat less fast food and less junk food, then they said, we're not making money. Oh, everybody's eating natural food, so we better make salads or something. So we can have an impact on our economies. What we have to do is work on our local, most local self is ourselves, our own addiction. But the reason for this slide is the following. When we start to do things like consume healthier foods in local places, a lot of people say, oh, healthy food is too expensive. I don't agree with that, but that's another story. But what we do is that, when I buy the first 5 heads of lettuce or whatever the case is from a local grower, then that gives them money to maybe grow more lettuce or whatever the case is. And the more we do that, we stimulate the local economies. Then, if we go to the farmers markets, there are more booths out there. I was at a local farmers market, and Aisha Snow wants to know which farmers market I go to. I go to the one over on Stella Link, which is not far from my office. And it's called, what's the name of that farmers market? Celeste, remember? Anyway, so
it's called Braeswood or something, Bayou, something like that.
Yeah, Braeswood Farmers Market or Braes Bayou Farmers Market. So that's a good one. There's one over in River Oaks. And there are a number of good farmers market in Houston. I plan to go visit more of them. But the point is that when we start to support these growers and the people at the booth, then they make more money, their economies grow, and they're able to produce more of this ideal healthy food. And when they're able to produce more, then more of it's available. Then they may be able to, they get, larger, a little bit larger economies of scale. They can maybe make their prices better, but it makes it more available for us. If I don't go buy the raw sprouts or greens or whatever the case is, then that person says, well, I can't make it anymore. I'll go and, sell, fried chicken. I don't know. But the point is that, we want to support the local economies, preserve farmland, rural, because if they're not growing things naturally, whatever piece of ground they're farming on, they're preserving that ground and that local economy. So what we do in our individual lives, how we spend what we buy, has I think a big impact locally, and that can actually spread to a greater extent. So I thought I'd just sort of share this little slide, which sort of, demonstrates that. But I'll try not to bombard you with too much of the PowerPoints tonight. But yeah, that's my thing. Any other thoughts on farmers markets or buying local? Y'all made a great point of that earlier.
I have something else that I tell my patients oftentimes, but a lot of times when I'm saying it, I want the parents to understand the benefit of eating locally is that we are taking in the local pollens into our body from the local produce, or the fruits and vegetables. And local can be kind of subjective. So we want something that's from somewhere in the state. And I know we can't do that with every food, but with some of them. So when you take in the local pollen, then your body equilibrates and balances to the environment that you're in. So example, if you travel to another state or another country, you eat some of the local food, you're breathing in the local pollen so your body can balance out and equilibrate. That way you don't get the allergy, because I get a lot of kids now who have a lot of issues with allergies and asthma, and they just, when the season change and the pollen is released, they flake. And I find that if they get in some local food, and some people do kind of a cheat with pollen, but you don't have to do it with pollen. You can do it with just eating food. It will help to, and it takes time, it will help to balance out the system so you don't have all of these allergies and inflammation during the seasonal change.
Okay, so the local growing helps from an allergy standpoint as well. Is what you're
yeah, as well. I mean, it does many things, but just, on a relatable plane where people are suffering with allergies, because every allergy season, the kids come in and the adults, and they're like, oh, it's my allergies. And it shouldn't, that's not normal. I think a lot of people think it's normal because so many people are suffering with it, but that's not normal. And usually it's because they're not eating any fresh. It has to be fresh fruits and vegetables. It can't be cooked fruits and vegetables.
Yeah, that's a big problem. Did any of y'all know about this Walmart? Beth Kelly, someone's Walmart 20-pound bag of soil, cut it open, seeds. Beth, can you give us more details on that? There's some bag of you can get from Walmart with soil in it. She opens it up, throws some seeds in it, it grows a bunch of lettuce. I need to find this.
Well, we also want to be careful of what soil we use. We want to make sure we use soil that is not tainted and more organic too. So we want to make good choices. Piggybacking on community markets, we can talk to persons that represent the farms or the growers and ask questions. Do you grow with pesticides? Do you use herbicides? Do you use Roundup? And ask things like that. And that's helpful to have that information. And also we lower our carbon footprint by not needing to transport foods from so far. Like our groceries, many times produce comes from quite a distance, sometimes even from South America or Australia or something like where there's a different climate.
Yeah, that's a good point, because if it comes from too far away, like you said, there's a whole issue of the carbon footprint. And then if it's coming from a different climate, then it's not in the environment you're living in. The allergic aspect of it, as Dr. Palmer mentioned, could throw things off. So there's a lot of health benefits in just the whole exercise of eating local. And so knowing where your food comes. I like the idea of talking to the growers, because that's really important, because oftentimes, at our restaurant, we have a food distributor. Sometimes we ask, well, where does this come from? So I have to go and check. I don't know. Often they don't know where it came from, let alone how it was grown. And so if you know the person who's actually, putting the seeds in the soil, that can make a big difference in terms of understanding what can happen and so on. So I think that's something that's important.
I think Empress on the Throne, she said something that I ran into a lot with going to farmers markets about they're oftentimes buying and reselling. At the farmers market, you can ask them, like you said, you can talk to them and ask them, where is the food sourced from? And so I was disappointed by that. And that's my whole motivation to start trying to grow something myself, because not that I necessarily wanted to or had time to do that, but a lot of the farmers markets now, it didn't used to be like this, but a lot of them are purchasing from somebody else who's growing it conventional and reselling.
Yeah, that's and Mary McCoy, I haven't thought to ask Salata where the foods are coming from. It gets us into that whole realm of what we're comfortable doing. Now, I alluded to the whole aspects of grocery stores and all, and I don't know. I would imagine at some point, long time ago, some farmers probably were sitting around talking about, boy, it's going to be really bad. They're going to stop growing their food, and most people move to the cities and having to get food from supermarkets or whatever. And I don't know, someone may have had that conversation before, but here we are living in a situation where, most of our food comes from institutions. Now, Mary McCoy says, well, she don't ask Salata where their food comes from, but, supermarket X, Y, or Z, they're getting their food from a lot of different places. And when we talk on a healthy lifestyle series, we go into some of the nuances of, what happens to this food, because a lot of times it's put on a shelf for long periods of time. Some foods are gas preserved, they're frozen and thawed, and they're harvested too early. You already mentioned the fact that coming from different regions that are outside our region. So there's a lot that happens to the food. So you look at that beautiful produce in the supermarket, say, okay, I'm gonna eat raw, plant foods, and it's like, okay, great, but what happened to that stuff? And so I think the institutionalization of our food is a concept that we have to consider in the context of what we get. So, and I don't want to, get, sound like too much of a purist, but if your food's been institutionalized, in other words, if you are hiring some employers and you say, well, you have a criminal background, guy said, well, I spend, 10 years in the big house. He's been institutionalized. Now, granted, we don't want to, speak negatively of that, but you're going to say, well, something happened in your life that I need to take a close look at in the context of hiring you. And that doesn't mean I'm not going to hire you because you've been to the big house, quote unquote. But I'm going to, look and see, well, what was the reason and have you recovered and so on. Similarly with our food. We may not say, well, I'm not going to buy anything that's been in the supermarket because it's institutionalized. But I think we need to look at that and say, well, look, food that comes through here may have been processed in a certain way that's not optimal. Well, now, supermarkets have a lot of good stuff in it, but they have a lot of bad stuff in it. And so I think when we go to these places, whether it's a supermarket XYZ or a restaurant XYZ, especially that large chain places, we need to try to get an understanding for where that food comes from and what's done to that food before we consume it. Any other thoughts along those lines, especially groceries? I've become very. I'm trying to wean myself away from relying mostly on the grocery store. It's a convenience. It's a convenience we've all grown up in, even in the so-called health food stores. But we have to check ourselves and say, well, wait a minute, how much of what I'm consuming comes from this institutionalized place, and do I need to start to make a transition? And my answer to that, hypothetical question rhetorical question rather is yes. I think we should all transition to where we're eating more and more natural food. That doesn't mean you all have to get out and grow a big garden or farm tomorrow. But I think what you need to do is, in your mind, at least strategize how you can start to eat, even if it's once a week, once a month, start to eat something that's grown locally in your back porch, in your backyard, and then build from there. And wherever that process takes you. And granted, you may be too busy to do things, and you may have to make adjustments in your life or, divert resources to get somebody to help you grow something in your backyard or your back porch or whatever. But whatever your strategy needs to be, I think it starts from a consciousness of saying, I need to move in this direction. Now, the exact steps I take, et cetera, is another matter. But once you consciously make the determination and dedicate yourself to move in the direction of eating more natural stuff and things that are more procured from a more local and natural environment, I think the better off you'll be.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, most of us shop at grocery stores and I guess the convenience and many times we have advocated to get grocery stores and fresh food in the neighborhood. Some of the urban areas, many times all we had is like convenience stores with very little produce. But if we shop in grocery stores, I just encourage my patients to try to get more organic, which is more expensive. So that will drive you more to community gardens, but also to shop the perimeter more and shop, and not to shop the interior where all the box canned and processed food is. But I once saw a diagram, and it's like, I think there's like 3 or 4 companies that, own most of the processed foods and the packaged foods we eat, and it's a monopoly. And it's amazing, how, companies like Nabisco and Kellogg's and things like all these companies, but there's like 3 or 4 major companies that own most of these companies, these grocery store processed food companies. And but we just have to know that it is things have happened to it. And I didn't know if you were going to show any videos or anything about that, but we can get into some of the things that are in food.
Yes, I'm going to. I've got a couple of queued up, and okay. I think it would be a good time to actually get into it. Dr. Palmer, you have any other comments on this?
I was just going to add that this is a great topic area that children would love to be involved in and growing, get a little pot And like the people in the chat are talking about let the children grow a little something or some herbs. And once they grow it and they see how it grows and they touch the earth underneath it, they are interested in eating it. It's weird, I know, but a lot of times they will eat things if they see the process versus you just giving it to them on a plate. So, that's something to start now with children, because that sets the background of the foundation for future. They've never seen, a lot of children don't know, sometimes even a lot of adults don't know what broccoli looks like. For example, a whole broccoli plant looks like in its form. Because I had broccoli in my garden and one of my friend's mother said, well, what is that? I said, that's broccoli, because the stalk is just one small piece on the plant. Now, of course, what we see in the grocery store is like a gigantic blow up of what your plant will probably look like. But, at least you know what certain plants are supposed to look like. And then you make your choice as to how big you want to buy something or how small you want to buy something. Because nowadays things in the grocery store are everything is supersized.
Yeah, for sure. A quick answer to Karen Evans about where she gets soil. I mean, I think you can Google it. There's some places in the Houston area you can get it, but I don't know where you're coming from, but certainly if I would just Google natural soil, I would imagine places that sell it have websites.
And somebody put in you probably haven't gotten down about composting yourself. Somebody put the
that's
answer.
right.
Yeah.
I saw it. Composting is actually a good way to sort of improve your soil. So start with what you have. And if you compost, that you're right. That's a good part. Let's see, maybe a vendor of your local farmers market might know a place to buy clean soil. That's good. Good point. If you're supporting these people, they probably know sources of good soil. And then there's a comment about composting as well.
And also, I mean, once you get into that world, I think things will open up. I know people who get soil from somewhere up on horse farms. So there are people who sell their horse manure and to farmers and to people who have gardens at depending on how much you want and how much you need. So I mean, it's available.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. So there's a lot of sources and that let's get into some of the couple of videos that I showed. And I'll tell you what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a short break, and then we're going to get into a couple of videos, because the two videos they're only a few minutes long, and we're going to comment on it. But I want to give our customers a take on what happens. And these are some authors of books, and these are guys who work in relevant fields. One's a doctor, and the other, I'm not sure if he's a doctor or not, but he may be a lawyer, but he talks about litigation with some of the big food industries. Let's take a quick break. We'll get back to that. Okay, we're back. So let's show this first movie, and it's a speaker at the Real Truth About Health conference, and he's giving some insight in terms of what happens with the company Monsanto. Let's take a look.
The labeling law, so now you can go get a wild-caught GMO salmon, which is...
That's not the video I want to see. This one.
She gave me the following few slides when we were speaking together at the European Parliament. And these are rat livers on the right that were fed GM soy, and the rats on the left were fed non-GM soy. And you could see the changes in them. We now know that tiny levels of glyphosate cause fatty liver, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which is now an epidemic with 30% of Americans experiencing it. It can lead to more serious issues like liver cancer. She also did a study where she found that the testicles of rats changed from pink to blue when they were fed genetically engineered soy. I like to leave this image on for a minute while I take a slow drink of water to burn it in the minds of people and to affect half the audience. And she also fed these rats genetically modified soy. These are female rats. They're Russian-speaking rats. Fed them GM soy starting 2 weeks before they got pregnant and continued through pregnancy and lactation, and more than half of their babies died within 3 weeks, compared to 10% when the mother rats ate non-GM soy. Well, as you could imagine, and also, by the way, they were smaller and could not reproduce. She was attacked viciously. She was a member of the Russian Academy of Sciences. She lost her job and was unable to find similar work after that. This is the kind of impact that Monsanto has around the world. I'm just giving percentage. I'm giving you a small percentage of the stories that I know about and have collected. And some of them more recently come from the Monsanto trials. I want to say I am so pleased that the results of the first 3 Roundup trials, where plaintiffs were accusing Monsanto of causing their non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, that Monsanto lost and the juries awarded them $2.3 billion. Now, the judges reduced it to $190 million from $2.3 billion, but that's still a heavy chunk of change. And the last official count for the number of plaintiffs waiting for their day in court was 42,700, but unofficial estimates put it at about 100,000. So the recent evidence, the recent report now is that the lawyers are talking to Bayer, which owns Monsanto, and to do a settlement. And there's one lawyer who I know who's holding out because he thinks that he should get more for his clients. But it can go either way in the next few days. There is a trial going on now in St. Louis that will be televised. So you can go online and Google it and find out how to get to the Monsanto St. Louis Roundup trial and have incredible entertainment. And I'm going to share some of we have even more entertainment, I mean real entertainment of stories from the lead attorney who won 2 of the 3 cases. His name is Brent Wisner, and we interview him at responsibletechnology.org. Monsanto does not like Brent Wisner. It could be someone's phone. If someone's phone is not on airplane mode in the front, you may want to put it in airplane mode. In fact, putting your phone, not just turning it off, doesn't stop the transmissions. You got to put it in airplane mode before you shut it off, and then, or even just airplane mode without shutting it off, and it stops the transmissions. So if you want to get some really amazing stories, dramatic, better than watching those courtroom movies, watch my interview with Brent Wisner at responsibletechnology.org, and that's where you can also make a donation as was recommended by. So one thing we know is that the Discredit Bureau that I have been fighting and reporting on really exists. It's a budget item, and it's called Let Nothing Go. That's their program. Not a single tweet, not a single post, certainly not a scientist discovering problems, certainly not Jeffrey Smith writing an article. Let nothing go was their policy. It's like scorch.
Okay, so we had cut that out. The point is, you have big business and there's, profit. Of course, Monsanto, many people know about them, has a lot of control over seeds and pesticides, and they make a lot of products related to how we grow our food. And there's a major incentive for them to dominate the food market in a certain way, because that, allows them to make more and more profits and the like. And so oftentimes, greed and power, are intermingled because, they support each other. Let me go to the next video and then we'll...
Can I say something about that one?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I just want the audience to know. I mean, he started talking about glyphosates, and I talked about that to my patients, and that's Roundup. And so the Roundup we spray on the cracks in our driveway, which is an herbicide, is found in some of our foodstuffs. What we find is it when they are preparing the food to keep it dry and keep mold from growing, some of the produce, they spray it. And so before it comes to us, it has Roundup in it. And he was alluding to that can increase the risk of liver changes that can lead to cirrhosis and maybe even liver cancer, and also non-Hodgkin's lymphoma has been linked to that, and that's the lawsuit he's talking about. So some of the environmental working group did a study on this glyphosate or the Roundup and residues in oats, and they just looked at oats at one thing, but oat cereals, like Quaker Oats and all the cereal Cheerios and all the things that we give our kids was found to have significant levels of Roundup in it, or glyphosates. So we need to know that. But the ones that were found to have zero or none were the organic. There were, I think that one study said out of 45 samples, 43 had glyphosates in it, and 16 of them were organic, but usually the organic was lower or zero. But I just want us to know, but it's not just oats. I think on the list is almonds. So if I eat almonds or almond butter, you want to get organic. I think apples was on there, and peaches, and I think apricots, and it's alarming, as Dr. Palmer said. It's just think about these things that we're not aware of in our foods.
That's a great point. Great point. Any comments, Dr. Palmer?
Yeah, I mean, every time I don't want to discourage the audience, but every time, we think of another level of, I need to think about that, there's another level, because, we say organics. I remember a while ago, I read a book, The Omnivore's Dilemma by Michael Pollan. And he this was years ago when I read it, and he explained the definition of organic, that is USDA organic. And in our mind, we have a tendency to think that organic means grown with nothing, that is clean, and that's how people reference it. But that's not the USDA organic definition of organic. Their definition has more so to do with only using products and items that they have approved, and it's a certain percentage of it that allows them to get a stamp, the USDA stamp on it. And then there can be another percentage of it that allows you to say made with organic ingredients. So it's a little bit more detailed than what we actually intuitively think that it is. And then also, I don't know if people know, people have worked in the grocery stores. Then there's the level of people saying, well, that organic banana might be labeled, the conventional one might be labeled organic, because you don't know what they're doing in the back. And people who work in the grocery store say that happens a lot too. So, it just the steps keep going up to say, we don't know what we're getting when we go into a grocery store. And I'm not saying to let your mind go that far, but again, growing at least one or two things at home will kind of guarantee that you get something that every step that it went through before it went into your body.
Yeah, the whole aspect of labeling things can be tricky, because like you said, they'll put a label on it, and then there'll be a connotation of what we think that label means, but the underlying definition of what's on that label can be much different. And so, and excellent points.
And non-GMO doesn't mean organic and grown organically. A lot of things are stated or have a label non-GMO, but doesn't mean it's grown without pesticides or herbicides.
Yeah, that's a good point. Non-GMO, and then you have like the watermelon that's organic, seedless watermelon. It's like, okay, yeah, it's organic, it doesn't have seeds, so there's something wrong with it.
Right. Right. So we want the one with seeds. We want it with seeds. I mean, convenience, they are making it without seeds. But, when I travel to Costa Rica, their watermelon has seeds, But in the United States, when you get a watermelon, it's hard to find one with seeds.
I know. I hadn't had watermelon all watermelon season. Couldn't find them with seeds. Anyway, let's look at this next video.
Block the labeling law, so now you can go get a wild-caught GMO salmon, which is, as you can see on the picture here, how big it is. We don't have any long-term studies on the genetic modification of an animal species that have been consumed by humans or what it's going to do to the environment when that has the effect itself on the environmental aspects. In my book, we'll cover things like meat glue, right? So how do we get steak so cheap? When I was a kid, again, I used to go to a restaurant, and it'd be something very expensive. I'd look over the side, and we'd see someone eating a steak, and they were dressed really nice. And like, wow, we used to look like, wow, they must be, they're higher class. They were able to eat this, or they would go Ruth Chris Steakhouse and stuff like this. But now, when you go to the steakhouses, you can get all-you-can-eat steak and shrimp for $7.99. How is that possible? Because we use things like meat glue. We get all the scraps of any of the meat products. We put this, it's an enzyme that comes from pig's blood and cow blood. We sprinkle as a powder, we wrap it in cellophane, and then we refrigerate it 6 hours later. It becomes a nice log, and we chop it up in steaks and serve it. Same thing with chicken thighs, and same thing with pork products, okay? I won't cover the chicken today, I won't cover the beef, there's a lot of things, but even what we have here is modified atmospheric packaging. It's how they can take red meats now, like beef, ground beef, and then we actually put it in the cellophane packaging of using carbon dioxide or monoxide, which makes the blood of the tissue there more pink and red. So that's what we think of fresh. But it can keep the food after it's spoiled up to 2 weeks. Now the studies show up to 2 years. Right? So how many people are like, oh, I take this, I cook this, I got sick, I got diarrhea, I eat the same thing. Well, what is it, And people not eating it raw, they're cooking it, right? So here's another example, and then we'll get on. But 5 billion burgers consumed, and people are like, oh, I need my all-beef patty, Dr. Pie. All-beef patty. I used to be like the same thing. Again, massage therapy. And the studies showed through the Annals of Diagnostic Pathology, this is a forensics journal, medical journal, that they took and analyzed the meat content in the top 8 fast food chains, and they found it basically had between 2 and 14%. That means 85% to 98% of your all-beef patty is not meat. Shocking, right? So what that means, if you had 2 quarter-pounder cheeseburgers, that's 5 grams of meat protein, which is 5 paper clips worth. Right? So you have to really start thinking like, well, why are we so sick? Because when you were children and you ate this food, you didn't get sick. We didn't get obese, and we didn't have all these inflammatory conditions, because your food is not what it is, right? It can't be cheaper than, when I was a kid, a piece of bacon or something that was added was more expensive. You had to pay $1 or $2 extra. And now it's like you're getting 3 patties with 6 pieces of bacon for $1. Right? Even in my book, we'll cover the hot dog report. The hot dog report is something that everybody should be shocked about, because everybody's like, oh, I have ballpark, or this is kosher. One thing that you need to know, whether it's a animal product or even a veggie dog, because they all have to be processed in the same facility to make hot dogs, is that the studies show that across like 12 top major brands that you get at the health food store and at the supermarket, it contains 2% of human DNA. That's not a side little chili finger. That's actually an ingredient now. So you got to think of, like, for those who are older here, Soylent Green, and for those who are younger, Cloud Atlas, and that will give you some ideas. So what does this get us? 1 out of 4 people get sick, 328,000 people go to the hospital, 23,000 Americans die from eating food in America. I'm not talking about some third world, fourth world country. I'm talking about the United States here. 100% of store meat now contains, by USDA reports and consumer groups, 100% of that has bacteria in it. E. coli, salmonella. So that's why if you eat this stuff, you got to make sure it's cooked. Okay. Some of it has cysts and parasites. Some of them have ammonia from the pink slime and the washing of that. If you don't know what that is, don't look that up before you go eat tonight. Meat now contains 2 to 5 antibiotic-resistant bacteria. So there's another doctor probably talking this week talking about superbugs and resistant things. This is a huge problem, people. Because people now, there are some people who have never taken antibiotics, they get sick, they go to the hospital, and now we give them all these things that doesn't work. It's because the food has been given the antibiotics over and over and over again. And remember, infections that are like E. coli and those things come from inside of the animal's gut. Vegetables do not have E. coli. They don't have listeria. They don't have salmonella. The contamination comes from a factory farm, or a CAFO as we call them, and that actually spills down the water stream. Right now, just a couple of days ago, this administration, I'm going to get political, but they passed a bill to remove the Clean Water Act, right, which protects our rivers and our streams and our lakes. So now we can dump these things. And so if you're an organic farmer and you're growing your vegetables and this comes onto your property and you didn't take it to the market, people will get sick.
Okay, there we have it. So interesting comments. I hope you all have been helping with these comments on the slide. A lot of questions and comments. I want us to get to. Somebody asked a question. Oh boy. Somebody asked a question, want to start their garden, which should they start with? Okay, I think it's Karen Evans. Let's see here. Now, if I want to start my own garden, how do I go about buying the best soil? Let's say, okay, I think we answered that with composting. But someone said they're going to start their own. Hi, great topic. Let's see here. If I were to start growing 2-3 vegetables, any recommendation on which ones are the best to start with? Thank you. Any thoughts on that?
You need to look up the seasons. That's number one.
Great point.
Yeah.
So it depends on when you start growing and what are the best in the season. But there's a couple of random seasons here in the U.S. I mean, in the Houston area that you know would be your favorites. Or let's say, for instance, go ahead and give the context that, hey, if it's in season, then this, and this would be what I'd recommend.
So, I mean, I think we all kind of know fall season is our greens. And down here in Texas, where we are, mustard greens grow pretty easily, along with, I think up north, like in Virginia, collard greens grow more easily. So depending on what regionally too, things grow a little bit better. Not that it won't grow, but you'll have better success if you're a beginner. Somebody put that squash is very prolific. Also, this time of year in the summer, okra grows plentifully in Texas in this area. So it is very regional. And then, of course, spring is our fruits. Now, down here, we don't really, when I say fruit, I'm talking about what we consider fruit, because technically anything that has a flower is a fruit by definition. So okra is technically a fruit too. But when I say fruit, I'm talking about our apples and things of this sort.
Yeah.
They typically grow in other regions. So if you try to grow that here, like I tried to grow strawberry down here, it didn't work. Some things you just learn. It's kind of a little bit trial and error. And then I think herbs will grow pretty easily, probably year round. So if you're just starting out, probably an herb garden would be the easiest thing to do. Yeah.
And Bev Kelly, she mentions this play Roots and Refuge on YouTube. I looked it up, and they have a YouTube show. So if you have time to write that down, look them up. I haven't seen that YouTube show. I'm going to look at it, but I think that's where she got the information about the soil in a bag. So it sounds like they have a number of great tips. Let's see, herb gardens, we mentioned that. Any other questions y'all see?
Somebody had asked the question earlier about the numbers on the produce.
Oh, yes.
So
yes, you want to address that, Dr. Atkins, Dr. Palmer?
Go ahead, Dr.
Well, definitely the 9s that starts with a 9 or organically grown, and so you want to look for the 9 for organically grown. So otherwise, you may see 4 and other numbers which are not organically grown. And I think it's is it 4 numbers is GMO or something? I can't remember.
8 at the beginning is GMO.
Okay, but it's 4 digits or 5 digits? I can't remember, but it's GMO. But you said 8 at the beginning.
Yes,
8 the first number. Okay.
Yes.
But so that's good to know, and definitely, your viewers are all over the country, and some in other countries. But we have to know the growing season in our region and what. So if you go to farm and feed stores and you can find organic soil, or you can ask about things like that, or there are local gardeners that have websites or gardening clubs and things like that.
Yes, and then and as people are indicating, there's a lot of information on YouTube of people that specialize in gardening. There's one on Crystal's Texas Garden. Again, I've never seen these, so I can't, this is just coming from our viewers, but I think it's worth looking at and seeing what you can grow. So again, from this last video, or both of them together, gives a message of what's done, and the second video talks about the games they play. And I think what's important, and we've alluded to this, is that don't rely on labels. When you look at food, it says, healthy, natural, or whatever, even, organic, has certain meanings of 100% organic versus organic or whatever, or other labels. We have to get to the nuts and bolts of our food, and we need to do our best to know where it comes from. Now, there's certain limitations that we all have in our capabilities at this point in time, but our limitations, or those barriers, I should say, to our limitations, start to be broken once we start to conceive something in our minds. And so if we conceive in our minds that, hey, it's my goal to eat a very nutritious, healthy, minimally processed plant-based diet, and that's my mission, then your mind is going to lead you to, doing that. Now, lack of time, lack of money, lack of whatever are not barriers, but hurdles. And you'll figure out how to get over those hurdles if you create the determination to move forward and optimize what you put in your system. I forgot who mentioned that. I flashed it on the screen and said we need to take control of what we eat. I think it was Black and Silver. Yes, we need to take some of our dependency back. They're going to control more what we eat. So, it's interesting how they make that, Black and Silver makes that statement, because think of it when you're a baby, you're very dependent upon, your parents and what they feed you. They feed you nourishing foods, you're going to be well nourished. They feed you trash, you're going to be trashed. And if you think about it, even those of us who are adults and we just grab what's there, whether we're grabbing what's there at the restaurant, we eat subconsciously. We may grab what's there at the supermarket, grab what's there at the restaurant, we become addicted to these things. And in a way, we lose our dependency. We've had situations, and both of you are aware of it, in the Houston area, we had hurricanes and supermarkets shut down. And a lot of people who are addicted to all these foods they eat, the supermarket, fast food place shut down. Fights break out. When they have, these shortages of fast food places run out of shortage of fried chicken sandwiches. People get killed. And so, it's a problem because there's a dependency. It's almost like a drug-like dependency at one level, with these chemicalized foods that we become addicted to, and sort of a need-based dependency, because we don't know how to grow our own food. We don't know how to procure our own food locally. So if they shut down or temporarily shut things down, then it's like our lifelines cut off. So that I like that word dependency that Black and Silver use, because it really cuts to at least a big part of the core of what we're talking about. So interesting there. Any other comments or questions? I don't want to.
Yeah, I just want to say one more thing, and this is kind of my soapbox a little bit. So there was a lot of talk about the watermelon on the side over here, and the fact that you have to search for seeded watermelon is a crime, and also the search for any seeded grapes is. I haven't seen a seeded grape, and I haven't eaten grapes in years for that reason, because it just doesn't make sense. And it seems like people don't understand that that's a problem. And so what happens is, going into the future, the children won't know that there is a difference, just like many of us don't realize that bananas are actually supposed to have seeds in them also. But since all of our lives, bananas have never had seeds in it, that doesn't make sense to us. So we don't even think about it like that. Now, I know that, farming has changed, and they change certain things and they hybridize certain things, but now they are just removing the seeds the seeds contain information. And I mean, this is getting more into kind of other areas of science, but it is not good for them to continue to remove seeds from our food. I actually talked to a watermelon farmer one time and asked him, what's the difference in the way that a seeded watermelon grows and a seedless watermelon grows? And he explained to me, this is somebody who's been growing watermelon for years, that the seedless watermelon have shallow roots that sit kind of on the top of the ground, and the seeded ones have deeper roots that go down. And so if you understand the whole purpose of us eating is to get these nutrients from the earth into our system, then when you eat seedless fruit, you're only entertaining your tongue. It's lacking the nutrients. So I mean, and that is what that's what I want people to understand, is that what they're feeding us lacks nutrients, which means we're wasting. It's a wasted meal, and so that is a problem.
Yeah,
I agree.
yeah.
I agree, and the life is in the seeds, and so there's been an orchestrated effort to make seeds not as available, and I understand that is a concern. When they started with genetically modifying soy and corn, which is most of it is, at least I would say at least 75% is genetically modified in the United States. That the farmers have to keep buying seeds from these companies like Dow or Monsanto, because the seeds, the GMO seeds don't produce, you don't get seeds to be able to grow again. And so it makes it more dependent on the chemical companies. So it's a concern in the hybridization of foods to remove the seeds and things like that. So I agree with what Dr. Celeste is saying. It is a concern. So that's why we need to go to local growers.
More powerful hearing this message, just sort of hearing you guys talk about it, hearing us talk about it, makes me even more motivated. Someone's asking about this Monsanto own all the seeds. I don't think they do, but they're trying to. And so, I think it's something that we need to be mindful of and be conscious of it. One thing, the whole level of consciousness is important. And I talk to a lot of my patients, as we know, when you go and eat, you maybe go to a meeting or whatever, it's, people just put food in their mouths and they don't think about it. They're not conscious of it. And what we're talking about is having an even deeper level of consciousness about your food. It's one thing to be conscious of what you're eating. Okay, this is, fried chicken, so I shouldn't eat that. This is, maybe steamed broccoli or raw broccoli salad, I should eat that. So I'm conscious not to eat this, but eat this. But then that next level of consciousness, okay, yeah, I'm going to eat this, but where did this come from? Okay, it looks green and it looks like a vegetable and a plant. But, Mr. Broccoli, tell me about your background. Tell me about your childhood. Who are your folks? My Mrs. Broccoli and, Mr. Broccoli. I'm from the, East Broccoli fan. So I want to know more about your food. And these kind of questions need to be asked. And so I think it's just a matter of having a deeper level of consciousness about our food. So let's see here. Barbara said there are thousands of seed banks in the world, supposedly for doomsday. Wow. So I'm going to encourage one thing, one action we can all take. You certainly cannot, and I'm going to do this myself, and I think, we probably should have a conference email among ourselves. One thing we could all do is we can start buying organic heirloom seeds. If anybody knows any source of organic heirloom seeds, put it in the chat right now to share with everybody else who's on the chat. And, we're going to write those down. And in the next, comment show, we're going to be sharing that information about organic heirloom seeds. So, yeah, let's do that. And let's get that, information out. So anybody have that information now? Share that to see Team Green Acres. Hold on, let me see here. Oh my goodness. Team Green Acres Family Farm. There's a link. Do they have seeds? I'm gonna put that in my email. Team Green Acres Family Farm. Because one thing we can do is we can start to store seeds, and then you may not be able to grow it today or tomorrow, but you have access to the seeds, and someone who can grow it for you. One thing, I've had issue with time with growing, so I may actually, contract someone to come and grow and maintain my garden in my yard. Mega Gardener, Rare Seeds, and Eden Brothers. Are we writing? Can y'all write those down? Let me write those down, because I want us to collect that. So there's a call to action to anybody who's seeing this live or seeing this on recording. Let's get this information. At the very least, you can store seeds. I don't care if it's a huge amount in a warehouse or a small amount. But because seeds could be sprouted, and you can grow sprouts and microgreens and things like that. So you don't need a big yard, and you can go a long time. So a lot of people are preparing for doomsday. I'm not saying, we're having doomsday tomorrow, but you never know when doomsday is going to hit. It doesn't, send you an invitation or a warning. But there are a lot of Ear Hustler, Team Green Family Acres Farms, Ice Age Farmer, Baker Creek Heirloom Seeds. Y'all can get these. And then we can email it among ourselves. And what I'll do is I'll create a list. We'll stay on for another 30 seconds to get something. This is are y'all growing your own food yet? Don't wait till the stores are empty again. Contact the backyard garden. Okay. And I'm going to put some of this on the screen so whoever's looking at this on recording can see it. So here's at Ear Hustler, the air is polluted. Let's see, Team Green Acres Family Farms, can probably get seeds there. Ice Age Farmer, Baker Creek Heirloom Seeds. We're writing that down. So I'm just putting it on the screen so anybody who's looking at the video can see this and get this information. So yeah, I think this is pretty good. And so we will leave this show on a positive note with good information, a call to action. So if you're on this, write as many of these down as you can. Go online, look and see how you can purchase and store seeds. You can at least do that. You have a shoebox, a closet, store as much as you can. That's the first step, I think. Any other thoughts, any other closing remarks before we close out, Dr. Atkins?
Well, heirloom seeds are wonderful because they go back, centuries, back I'm happy to see those resources and we can look into that. But and just to encourage our family members and those with children, that the more you see things on commercials and on TV, those are the foods that are more processed. And so the healthier foods you will not see on TV. So decrease the amount of television your children are watching, even adults, because we are influenced by what we see on television, on commercials to purchase.
Yeah, you can argue TV is a bad food in of itself. Somebody asked what are heirloom seeds. Dr. Atkins just answered that. They're seeds that go back into the origin of the food. And so that's a good question. Dr. Palmer, any comments?
Just to piggyback after Dr. Atkins, seeds are information. And from generation to generation, they carry valuable information into the future. So just as we as humans are generational, plants are also generational. And so we want that information, and this is where human and plant life and everything is one. And I know I don't want to get too mystical here, but it's all one, and they do the same thing that we do. And so kind of tweaking with them is at the same time messing around with them and taking their seeds out and doing that does the same thing to our body. It tweaks with our body. It removes our seeds, and now fertility and other things become an issue. So you have to think about it on that level too. I know that I don't want to go too deep into those areas, but when we are messing around with our food and modifying our food, we're also messing around with our human bodies and modifying our human bodies into something that we probably don't want to be in the future.
It's okay to go deep. We're not on CNN, so we can go deep. If you want to go deep, go deep. I mean, the thing is that's what we're here for. It's uncut, unscripted. Karen Evans mentioned this documentary. I want to at least get is this on Netflix, Karen? Where can we see this documentary? Y'all know about this Need to Grow?
No.
I'm not aware. The Need to Grow.
Yeah, it's a documentary. It predicts that's something we need to do. We may even put this in. So we'll put together a resource on the seeds. If Karen comes back in time, even after we go off air, we can see some of the comments. And if we find out whether Mary McCoy says she saw it, but she didn't tell us where. Mary, where'd you see it? I mean, where is it on Netflix, Mary? You're on you say you saw it, but you're not going to tell us where. Okay. So, our listeners are holding secrets. That's all right. It must be getting late.
No, I think they're on a little bit of a delay. I think she's probably coming late.
Probably. And I'll see it when we come up. I'll see you guys backstage. And this has been an enlightening show. As always, I learned stuff. And the other part about it, is, when I hear this information, I live in this space and I'm constantly coaching and counseling people. But the nice thing about this, when I hear this, I get some extra motivation. So there's an aspect of hearing and then acting on it and then receiving. So we gain some level of experiential knowledge. It's one thing to be cognizant of something, but it's another thing to really experience it. So you hear it, you act on it, you do it, you start to live it, and then you gain a multiple dimensional aspect of knowing something. I often tell people, sometimes, people come in as well, oh, I know what I need to eat, I just don't do it. But, knowing and not doing is the same as not knowing. And so we need to start to act on these things. And many of the barriers we have are not barriers, but hurdles. And we need to see them as hurdles and not barriers. And then we have to come up with a strategy of how we're going to hurdle. The hurdler is running a race. They've got hurdles in front of them, but they're looking at the finish line. And they have a strategy for going over each hurdle. And that's what we need to do, have a strategy for going over each hurdle. So, again, thank you for joining us. I know we went over today, but if you found that this has been helpful, please subscribe. This message really needs to go viral. Hit the thumbs up, show us some love. Also, there's a thank you button by the screen. You feel free to donate to the channel. We use these donations to go toward our research. We got some upcoming research coming in. In fact, I'll probably do a show on the study that we will have coming up pretty soon. So, I want you to take this message, but not only just listen to what we're saying, but start to act on what we're saying. But until next time, keep it fresh, natural, and live.